Good afternoon and welcome to the March 19th edition of the Gold Goats and Guns Short News. My name is Tom Luongo. We've got a lot to talk about. And today I want to talk about Brexit again because, Brexit is really the topic of the day. It's an incredibly important thing that we're looking at this point in time, and therefore we should continue to look at it in depth as we march our way down to the potential for the Brits leaving the European Union on the 29th of March. Before we get onto that, though, of course, a little housekeeping. Monday nights, 8 o'clock. Friday nights, 8:30. We do a live stream here. We open up the discussion a little wider than we normally do in these short ones. But we'll talk about anything. We'll talk about economics, politics, philosophy, music, movies, you name it. Whatever I'm gonna do. Wherever the conversation takes us. And it's a good time. 60, 75, maybe 80 people sometimes in the chat at any one time. All right, so let's get started and talk about Brexit. What happened yesterday? I almost jumped on yesterday right after I saw the news that Speaker John Bercow had ruled invade against Prime Minister Theresa May, bringing her insanely bad withdrawal agreement and treaty with the European Union up for a third meaningful vote. I wanted to watch to see how everybody would deal with it, how they would talk, and we talked about it a little bit last night on the live stream. So don't know that there's been any real change. I just find it really funny that both sides continue to think that they're winning over this, when it's obvious that Bercow, a known Remainer, did this in order to stop May from bringing the deal to the table again in order to try and force a revocation of Article 50. I think that was his ultimate plan, and to save his own skin, right? So after that happened yesterday, it looks like that there are three options on the table at this point. Obviously, Theresa May is going to go to the European Union on Thursday and ask for an extension. There are reports that she's asking for both a long and short extension, that if we get a short extension, we will need a short extension for blah, or we'll need a long extension if not, right? Basically, she's going to cover all of her bets because she's working for them. Then there's the possibility that if they don't grant an extension, then there are two options. And one is the dramatic one, which is where the government is forced to step down. Jeremy Corbyn, that ultimately they dissolve Parliament. And I've heard arguments about this. Yesterday they were talking about this on Nigel Farage's show, that there would be a dissolution of Parliament and a series of motions to dissolve Parliament, and then use the caretaker government to revoke Article 50. So, and obviously the last thing after that, of course, is that none of that happens, because no one actually wants to vote to dissolve Parliament and revoke Article 50. Because remember, as I keep saying over and over again, everybody wants to scuttle Brexit in Parliament, or almost everybody. About 4/5 of them do. But no one wants to be blamed for it, because they know that public opinion truly isn't on their side, no matter what you see on Twitter. Okay, don't even go into the cesspit that is #Brexit on Twitter, because it's worthless. It is the same 12 tweets over and over again from known Remainers, and the odd tweet from, somebody rational. So this is really fascinating, because we saw this morning that the French president came out and said, nope, we're not giving them an extension. We don't have any reason to. Michel Barnier, the lead negotiator for the EU, is saying we're prepared for a no-deal Brexit. Angela Merkel came out and said that we want the withdrawal agreement and we're going to fight until the very end to try and get the Brits to agree to the withdrawal agreement. Of course, because that's exactly what she wants, because it's her deal. So personally, I think Merkel's not bluffing. She wants that deal to go through, because without that deal, she knows that Germany is horribly exposed. She knows that the European Union is horribly exposed. Barnier is bluffing. While they may be prepared in theory, they may be prepared at the logistics level, right? But they're not prepared to lose here. As Nigel Farage pointed out yesterday on his radio show, he's like, the last time I saw Mr. Barnier, he had the document, the withdrawal agreement. It was bound, it was signed, it was ready to be put up on the shelf as law. It's not changing. So now the question is, does the extension pass the EU Parliament? And there's a very good chance that it will not. And, you know, I know that there's like some rumors out there that Farage and Matteo Salvini of Italy have got a deal behind their back, behind everyone's back, to try and scuttle the vote by having Italy veto an extension. You know that Merkel is going to be, when Merkel says we're going to work till the very last moment to make this happen, that's her saying we're going to whip everybody into line and threaten them with fire and brimstone and destroying their stock markets and their economies and everything else if they don't vote my way. We all know this. The question is, do people like Salvini, Orban, and Andrzej Duda in Poland have the stones? And I think that Merkel has made herself a number of enemies over time. And it's even worse than that. There's so many people within the EU do not want to give the Brits any more time. They're tired of it. We're tired of it. The British people are tired of it. Parliament's tired of it. Everybody's tired of it except for the people who don't want it to end because they don't want this to happen. Because they never wanted this to happen in the first place. So that's where we are. Remember, the City of London and the EU are the ones that have the biggest desire to keep the status quo. They are absolutely aghast at the idea of going to trading on WTO terms. They do not want this. Today, today or yesterday, we got notification that Commerce Bank and Deutsche Bank, and this is important, are being forced into a merger, even though they don't want to be forced into a merger. But with Basel III, new Basel III rules looming at the end of the month, 2 days after Brexit is supposed to occur, they need to do something in order to shore up their new capital adequacy rules that are going to come into effect under Basel III. The German banks are horribly exposed. Okay? And the German government is effectively pushing that merger onto Deutsche Bank, who doesn't want to do it. And remember, the Italian banks are all at risk as well. So the big question is, going back to what I said earlier, to get through the extension vote, why would Matteo Salvini, other than in a fit of pique, why would Matteo Salvini scuttle an extension? What's his motivation? Because he could just use it as a political tool. He could just use it as a bargaining chip with Merkel. Like, look, I'll vote for this extension, but you're going to give me something. You're going to give me, exemptions on the budgetary rules. You're going to give me what I want in order to get Italy off the mat. You're going to allow me to sign an MOU with China for the Belt and Road Initiative. You're going to allow me to introduce mini-bots or whatever in order to stabilize the situation fiscally within Italy. We're going to get real change to the fiscal rules within the European Union that will allow Italy to grow and other countries to grow. You will give up some of your control over this union, or I will not vote for it, because Salvini has every incentive to allow Britain to leave, because it will materially weaken the EU at a fundamental level. It will cause massive panic within the markets. He can hold everybody hostage by saying, if our banks go down, your banks go down. Everything starts to come apart at the seams, and you have a lot more to lose than we do. Because we can just ditch the euro and stiff your banks and stiff you and everybody, and you are the one that's going to be on the hook. And Salvini could do this. Hungary could do this. Hungary's not in nearly as bad a fiscal position as Italy is. What's the worst that can happen to Hungary? They go forward with Article 7 censure against Hungary. Hungary then just applies to leave the European Union at that point. And we have a path. We don't want a treaty with you people. We're done. We're out. Bye. Who else leaves? The whole Visegrad group would leave at that point. So Merkel doesn't have any leverage within her own union that I can see when the rubber really meets the road. Not there's some leverage here or there, but not if you are dealing with people who have principle and are willing to go to the mat and willing to be vilified and willing to risk real pain in the short term in order to get real change in the long term. You have those people, there's absolutely nothing Merkel can threaten them with, short of invasion. With what? The American army? Trump's on Salvini's side. He's on Brexit's side. Trump's kind of the silent player in all this. So I find this all really fascinating right now. So now the big question is, what did Bercow really unleash here? He might have actually unleashed the very thing he was trying to prevent, which is a no-deal Brexit. Because here's the gig. If the Tories want to win this politically, all they have to do is go, well, the EU wouldn't give us an extension. We're going out on a no deal. Everybody who thinks they're anyone in London will scream bloody murder, and the country will rejoice. They all talk about the horrible uncertainty of a no-deal Brexit, and we're gonna be made weaker, and we're gonna lose money, and oh my God, no. The real uncertainty is not knowing what is gonna happen. I see report after report, headline after headline. Well, hospitals are running out of drugs because they don't know what to do with Brexit next week. Yeah, everybody doesn't know what to do, so shipments are stopping dead cold into the country. No different than when Trump was threatening a 25% tariff on all Chinese goods. Softwoods imports into China stopped on December 1st. Like, commerce around the world just stopped because no one wanted to be stuck with a shipment import that all of a sudden was going to be subjected to a different tariff that would make the originally agreed upon price unprofitable. And the people who are creating the uncertainty are the Remainers at this point, because there's a very clear path. WTO on March 29th at 11 o'clock. That's it. It's not that difficult. And if everybody would stop trying to stop Brexit, we would have clarity and we could move on. And the entire world is being held hostage by this. It's not just the Brits, who I feel terrible for. Even the worthless Remainers. The very thing you're using to try and they're trying to use to argue against Brexit is the very thing that Brexit resolved on March 29th would solve: uncertainty. Markets hate uncertainty. Once they have certainty as to what they're going to do, even if they don't like the outcome, they're willing to work with it. And all of a sudden, there would be a massive rally across all asset classes. Yeah, the pound would drop 3 or 4 cents, maybe 5 cents. So what? In fact, for the Brits at this point, the pound is overvalued. And it would make their exports to the EU worth more. And what would the EU have to do at that point? They would also have to devalue the euro. And that would start unwinding sovereign bonds across the country, across the continent. Because all of a sudden, if the euro were to drop 5 or 6 cents or 7 cents, the pound were to drop 7 or 8 cents, what would start to happen to all these carry trades? What would happen to all these sovereign bonds sitting been stuffed under the balance sheets of all these banks across Europe under Target 2 and all these stupid alphabet soup programs that the ECB's put together? They would all degrade in price with, like I said at the beginning, with Basel III rules coming into effect. And now all of a sudden they would have to sell and unwind a lot of those carry trades, and they have to sell those assets, which they can't even do. Now what? The whole thing starts to fall apart. So yeah, at this point, the whole world is being held hostage by this. Because the people, as always, the people who think they run the world will not give up until the very last minute. And so, as always, it's going to come down to specific people. Will Salvini veto an extension? Possible. If he does, will the Remainers in Parliament have the stones to try and revoke Article 50 by dissolving Parliament? Or will they look at their constituents honestly? And they look at the opinion polls honestly, and they'll know what to do, which is to save their, because if you bet on anything in this life, as always, bet on the venality and the fecklessness of politicians. They always act in their own best interest. Now, unless every Remainer in Parliament has been paid off by George Soros and the rest of the City of London, hey, man, it's very possible. These people are going to have a pretty low threshold at this point. That's where we are. So, I don't tend to want to go long on these. I'm already at 16 minutes, but somebody just asked me if I could explain the Irish backstop. The Irish backstop is an abomination, which says that, look, that the point of the Irish backstop is that the Northern Ireland border to honor the Good Friday Agreement between the Republic of Ireland and Ireland, that the border would remain open. In order for that to happen, the EU is demanding that that Northern Ireland stay in the customs union and the single market and be effectively ruled by EU trade policy and EU law, because Northern Ireland would be forced to normalize all of its policies with the EU, even after the rest of the United Kingdom has left. Okay? Now, the backstop is the insurance policy that will stay in place even after the negotiating period is done, which is the next phase of this, where they negotiate over a free trade deal and all the other things and the rest of their relationship. The withdrawal agreement doesn't cover everything. It's only the first phase of this. And so the Irish backstop, the stumbling point on the Irish backstop is that there's no unilateral way for the Brits to get out of the backstop if they do not like the way the EU is negotiating. And as it stands right now, if May's deal is accepted and if that treaty is signed and put into law, the Brits will effectively be trapped within that treaty indefinitely, and there's no unilateral way for them to declare their way out of it. And the hardline Brexiteers are saying, no, don't do this, which is exactly what they should do. Mike Bernard. So now we have to get. We don't get a full hour of Tom until Friday evening. Not acceptable. I vote he has to stay and remain on the air. Remain. I love it. Thank you, Mike. I appreciate that. So that's where we are. That's what the Irish backstop is. And so honestly, if the EU were to give up would give up their control over the dispensation of the Irish backstop, then May's deal would actually be okay, because if there was a unilateral way to get out of the treaty, then it would force the EU to actually negotiate a worthwhile trade deal with the Brits. It would allow future governments to still be able to control Britain's destiny. As the treaty is written right now, no. It's actually worse than staying in the European Union. They're better off revoking Article 50 than accepting May's deal, which is not May's deal, it's Merkel's treaty, and then trying again with a different government, preferably an actual Brexit government. So I'll stay for a couple more minutes, but I've got other work I want to do today. So if you guys have any other questions, I'm willing to stay around. But for those of you who, you can leave now. It's just fine. The situation is really, it's incredibly complicated. Honestly, it's an existential threat for the EU. The Brexit is an existential threat for the European Union. This is a project 75 years in the making. You don't expect the people who are in charge of this to give up easily. All the Remainers who are constantly berating that, oh, well, Brexit was a corrupt vote and it wasn't binding. And no, that's all nonsense. This is about whether or not a country wants to be ruled by its own parliamentarians or not. Now, I'm a big narco-libertarian. I don't really believe in any of this voting stuff anyway, but I would much prefer to have a Congress that I can vote out of office than have a bunch of unelected drunk bureaucrats in Brussels telling me what to do. The last thing in the world I want is to be ruled by a odious prick like Jean-Claude Juncker. And I think everybody with anybody with half a brain in Britain doesn't either. So User 13 reminds us that, the other option for Northern Ireland is for them to get out, is for the UK to leave Northern Ireland completely already. It's an option. And it's also an option for the rest of it. It's also an option for Wales and Scotland and everybody else. Look, if at that point, if after Brexit, these other regions of the United Kingdom want to leave, well, then they should be free to do so. My personal take. I don't care what they voted on last year or 3 years ago or haven't voted on or whatever. At the end of the day, people don't want to be ruled by somebody else. People aren't going to be ruled by that somebody else. It's just going to happen. So, the big question going forward, and there'll be the last point I make before I leave. The big question going forward is how much damage does this do to all of the institutions? Look, don't kid yourself. The EU is crapping their pants right now because they understand that that the fight that they're seeing, that they're forcing over Brexit. Don't think for a minute that most of Europe doesn't understand what's happening here. That this is just a replay of the horrible treatment that Greece got during debt talks in 2015. The EU has made it abundantly clear that they will punish the Brits for what they're doing, for their disobedience, and that this is behavior that will not be allowed to stand. Make no mistake. Now, there are many people across Europe who are absolutely appalled by this. And they're equally appalled by the Brits for not having the stones to go through with what they voted for, because their parliament is a corrupt bunch of feckless weasels. So how much damage does this do to the integrity of the EU, as well as the integrity of British parliamentary politics? I mean, Merkel is literally working from within the Tory party to destroy what's left of the British parliamentary system and keep them shackled to the EU in perpetuity. That's monstrous. It's disgusting. And it's who she is. And it's unconscionable that the people who are so dead set on remaining because of the fear of something might change, or because they just fundamentally believe in world government, which is just otherworldly to me, that they're willing to put up with this. I mean, if nothing else, the behavior of the European Union should be shocking to people. And I think it really has been shocking to most of the British electorate. And that they're at that point where they're like, look, we're good. Just let's leave. Let's just get away from these people because they're evil. So, Jabba Soapbox reminds us couple of comments before I leave that the plans the EU have for the next 5 to 10 years are astonishingly bad. Ramoners don't even consider this. No, they don't. They're all living in this fantasy world. Like, we live in a better world now that the EU has kept us from having wars for the last 70 years. People haven't had wars for the last 70 years because you didn't have anything to fight over. If we Americans didn't rebuild it for you, you wouldn't have a shit to build to fight over in the first place. It's unbelievable. In that respect, Trump is right. So, and all of this is happening against the backdrop of Germany trying to extricate itself as an independent nation on a foreign policy front from the United States. Merkel's playing a very dangerous game before she leaves office. It's going to be very interesting to see what happens. A year ago, or a year and a half ago, when she lost the election, or nearly lost the election, I said the end of Merkelism is nigh. Unfortunately, watching Brexit happen, I was wrong. It's coming. It's just not nigh. At least not yet. Maybe it'll come soon, because there's looks to be a revolt within our own party. Hopefully, we can actually get past this age of the Stasi running Europe. I thought we got rid of those people when, you know, the Berlin Wall fell. All right, that's enough. You guys, this has been the Gold Goats and Guns short news for Tuesday, March 19th. I'm sure I'll do this again sometime tomorrow or Thursday because, you know, look, there's more Brexit news all the time. Follow my work over at tomluongo.me. You can support my work over Patreon/GoldGoatsAndGuns, and you can follow me over on Twitter when I infrequently deign to actually tweet at TFL1728. You guys have a great afternoon. It's been a pleasure. It's been a privilege. It's been an honor. Keep your stick on the ice.